Hi, welcome back to Center Webcast. This is episode 21. I am joined next by Dr. Joseph Schwartz, the president of the board of the Beth Israel Synagogue, as part of our continuing interfaith series. Dr. Schwartz, how are you doing?
Good. How about you?
Fantastic. I feel like I know you from a number of different areas or around town, and I always want to have like a long conversation with you.
We should do that.
We should do that sometime. We should do that. We should do that. Well, I'm going to ask you particularly about that Beth Israel, but at some point it'd be lovely to chat about just all sorts of things. I think it would be, I'd be really interested. But I have invited you here for our Interfaith edition, and can you tell us a little bit about Beth Israel Synagogue here in Indiana and about your role there, just for folks who may not be familiar with it?
Well, Beth Israel Synagogue has been an entity in Indiana for over 100 years. We had our centennial celebration a few years back. And back in the day, there were 50, maybe 60 family members, possibly up to 200 members of the congregation. Jewish congregations everywhere migrate, they move around. Our congregation consists of about roughly 10 family members now, possibly. Maybe even 10 members. I don't know, we might be down to 5. We don't have formal leadership. We don't have a rabbi. We meet once a year for high holidays. And it's a good thing we're Jewish. I'll put it to you that way, because we can practice our faith in a relatively secular manner. I know that my kids have both been to Israel, my daughter many times, and she said, it's very different there. It's more of a cultural experience than a religious experience. And I said, well, I get that, because that's where I was raised. And believe me, I had both. And born from Orthodox Jews and raised conservative, and our congregation here became a Reform synagogue. And I was president. I became president because nobody else wanted to. And so it's a mitzvah. My uncle always said, if somebody says, call you, if they say, get up, read from the Torah, don't be shy. Get up and do it. Somebody calls on you to serve the community in some way, don't be shy. Get up and do it. It's a mitzvah. Look it up. Mitzvah is a good term. It's a blessing of sorts. So in Israel, I've heard the term secular Judaism, and it's a good thing that we have this quality. I think it's innate to Judaism because of the diasporas. Many times Jews dispersed throughout the land, and probably the earliest one was, not the earliest one, but one of the most memorable ones was the exodus of the Jews from Egypt. And the events that led up to that are particularly relevant to what we're going through today.
How so? Can you, in terms of the pandemic, or in terms of?
Yes.
So say more about that. I guess. I mean, my other question was going to be, how is the Jewish faith sort of led you through? How does your faith tradition lead you through times like this? As you said, there's no shortage of instances of Jewish folks being persecuted throughout history. How does that sort of inform and affect folks today?
Well, we've been through this before, and we just celebrated Passover last month, 2 months ago, and it was interesting. We all Zoomed from afar, from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh to Indiana. And we had a good little meeting after our Passover Seder. And a point that I made was, there were several curses and plagues. Mm-hmm. This is just one. If we can't handle one, we got problems. Mm-hmm. So one of the symbols of Judaism during that time was to hope for the angel of death to pass over your house. That's Passover. Mm-hmm. When that part of history came about, I said, isn't that interesting? We hope that the curse, this plague passes over us and leaves us, not as individually or as a family, but as a community, more whole than when it came through. So to leave things better than when they came upon them is one of the tenets of Judaism. And it's not something that comes about easily. Fortunately, I'm not a Bible scholar and I'm not a terribly astute historian, but I was immersed in this my entire childhood and upbringing. And then when I moved here, I really hadn't set foot in a synagogue for probably a decade. And they said, you need to come because we don't have enough members. And I got there and they said, you need to be president because we don't have anybody who wants to do this. I go, are you kidding me? This isn't my thing, but it is now.
That's the thing.
Do your thing, right?
That's the thing about leadership, right? Usually people aren't looking for it. So you mentioned a little bit about, I realized the congregation here in Indiana is somewhat smaller, but it sounds like there's a good deal of connection through Zoom and through technology. Has that been something that folks have been using to connect? I guess we went through Passover, was an important holiday. Is that something that will sort of continue on here? If it's built up, if this is what we do during this pandemic, can we continue? Some of the other faith leaders we're talking to, they're saying actually, attendance is up by a significant amount. Attendance is up and donations are up and engagement overall is up overall for in a number of ways. And, so how do we continue that? Are you seeing a similar kind of an engagement happening because of the social isolation?
I think probably not as much in our community, definitely not in our community, but as a whole in Judaism, I think it's the technology edge is a double-edged sword. It is not a substitute for human contact. You really can't connect as well. It's nice. It's really nice. I mean, I love this. But it's not the same. And we celebrate our Shabbat every Friday night. My family, we get together, we light candles, we say a few prayers, we express gratitude. There is no petitionary prayer during Sabbath. There's only prayers of gratitude. So the things we're most grateful for are our health, our sustenance, and our ability to serve our fellow humankind. And those three things seem to be the foundation of what each individual Jew practices, either inwardly or outwardly. And we don't adhere to a congregational physical presence as much as maybe some think that we should. Now, I know that I'm not speaking for all of Judaism here, believe me. I'm speaking for Joe Schwartz.
Sure.
And one of my friends said, you're an interesting fellow. She used to live here. She was a professor at IUP. And she said, you're a Jew-boo. And I was like, what the heck is that? I never heard of that term. She said, you're a Jewish Buddhist. Oh, well, that's interesting because I have a strong foundation in Chinese culture and martial arts from college. And then I was raised pretty much Orthodox conservative Judaism. And I looked it up, and sure enough, it exists. It's a thing. It's a thing. I didn't know that it was a thing, but I guess I'm it. So one of the things that I read years and years and years ago, I'll bring it up here real quick, is from one of my mentors, Bruce Lee. In times like this, you have to change shape. You have to change your form. You have to adapt. Charles Darwin said, it wasn't the survival of the fittest, it was the survival of those who fit their environment. And this is very important right now. Our environment has changed. With technology, it's changed. With COVID-19, it's changed. There's people that are changing, they're adapting or they're maladapting. And this is something that Jill talked about. She said, movement is critical. If you don't move, you're in trouble. And so here's the thing with Bruce Lee. He said, be like water, making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around it or through it. If nothing within you stays rigid, outward things will disclose themselves. Very profound. This is almost right out of the Torah.
Yeah.
I mean, I read this stuff and I think the Judaism and the Taoist, Hindu, Buddhist philosophies are very congruent in that respect. So it says, empty your mind, be formless, be shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it into a teapot and it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
I like it. It strikes me that both Buddhism and Judaism are incredibly historic and maybe have, I don't know, gained the ability to be like water and adjust just over history. I mean, we're still here. You're still here, right?
Right. Resilience. That's the key.
Yeah. That's what we need.
You asked me, where do we get this? We've been here before. And we've all been here before. Some of us are more anchored to having been here before. Self-care and care for your fellow human.
You recognize that these are important things. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the advice. I think that is super good advice. How can folks be involved in Beth Israel if they want to get involved in Beth Israel Synagogue here in town if they're listening right now?
Well, we don't have a website. We don't have an internet presence. I've been president of the board. I've tried to push for that stuff. The members that are there, there's some old members. They don't want anything to do with that. There's some new members. They don't want much to do with it. They just want to have a synagogue. We still have a synagogue. I take care of it. I make sure that the building is sound. And it's been a kind of a project of mine since I retired. I was a chiropractor for 35 years. And I retired with an injury.
So they could go and knock on the door. They could go, I mean, there's a physical location. There's a physical synagogue there.
Yeah, you can knock on it, you can call. There's a phone. And if you leave a message, there's a fairly good chance somebody will get back to you.
Somebody will get it. It'll get to you. It'll get to
somehow it'll trickle down.
Well, I thank you so much for joining us and adding your words on how faith can kind of get us through this time. I think it's really, really helpful. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with?
No, just be kind.
Be kind. Support. Well, thank you so much. We will be right back with our send-off. Thank you much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, welcome back. I think we're just back for our send-off here. I thought that was a really incredible program today, thinking about wellness and being healthy. In particular, Dr. May's advice on making sure we take care of ourselves and also our mental health workers and recognize there's going to be a timeline. I think is super important. How about next? We've got a show coming up on Thursday. Is that right? Sybil,
yes,
you still there?
I'm still here.
Yeah. All right.
Yes,
so,
we do.
We're moving on to Yellow coming on Friday. What are we going to talk about on Thursday?
So we have a representative from the YMCA that's going to talk a little bit about what's going on there. Of course, gyms and fitness studios and things of that nature with large clientele will not be able to open under Yellow. However, daycare centers are. YMCA has a camp for the summer, so we want to ask a little bit about what's going on with that. Like, what does that look like if YMCA's gym's closed, but the camp's able to open and operate? Like, how's that going to work? Also, some small businesses around here, and we're right now in the phase where we have 3 different types of small businesses, I guess, categories. We have businesses that were closed completely and now can reopen. All the social distancing and all the mitigation efforts still have to occur. They're asking for curbside, but they don't necessarily have to. So we have those type of businesses. We have some businesses that were shut down and they remain shut down, and they won't be able to open until till we're in the red, which would be restaurants, bars, and any amusement or tourist site that carries people more than 25, I think, people at a time. And then we have businesses that were open, but they were open, restaurants again, that were open on like a semi basis, so they couldn't have people inside, but they could only serve their clientele through a drive-through or pickup window or something of that nature, to see how's business been since the beginning of the COVID to now, 2 months later. People still coming by to visit? Are they still supporting things like that? So I think it'll be interesting to hear from the different types of businesses, and in the middle of the reopening, what's happening with that. Also, some questions about the small business loans, the second round, if some people were successful the second round compared to the first. So I think that'll all be interesting as well.
The small business angle continues to be really fascinating to me. We heard from our representatives and senators that there's a lot of money coming through, but I still hear a lot of folks that here in town, despite the fact that we have all these banks and we supposedly have all these relationships, there are folks in town that are still really, really hurting and are going to be facing, law enforcement by opening ahead of time, possibly, or talking about it. So I'm really interested in how that small business stuff is really happening. Also, on Thursday, I should say, we've been accused of, and maybe it's true, being relatively 15701 centric, relatively Center Indiana centric. So we invited Dave Janicek, who is currently a Blairsville Borough Councilor, but also has an incredible amount of wealth of knowledge about small businesses because he was the Downtown Indiana Director. And we have the current Downtown Indiana Director coming as well on Thursday. So it's going to be a good show. And we'll continue to have small businesses on. Let us know how you're doing with the relief. Anything else, Brandon? Do we have anything else we want to add? We got to skip our data moment.
I was going to say that maybe we can sneak a few questions with Dave about Boys and Girls Club. I do believe he's a director of Boys and Girls Club right now.
Yep.
So
I think that's right. That's right. That's right. All right. Well, that's episode 21. Thank you much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.